All right, welcome everybody around the world. Welcome to all my subscribers. I've, like I said in the video description, I've shared this testimony countless times over the last 10 years. I've been on YouTube, on my various YouTube channels. There's a few people who are quite familiar with my account, my testimony. But I don't think at the moment I have any videos up that, any of my video testimonies where I talk about it. I think I've taken them all down. So I just think it's time for it to be heard. We have Three-Eye Atlas making its way through our solar system. This is something, quite unprecedented, even according to science. Even if it is just a space rock of sorts, it's still unprecedented by many factors. But Three-Eye Atlas, it just serves as a marker for what could come. And, it's just so poignant that it's happening at this time, which is between the span of 2023 and 2028, in which the end of days should occur according to the Bible prophecies, as I talk about in my book that's available on Amazon. Welcome, man. Good to see you as well. Got a little time to talk tonight, so I'm trying to utilize the chance while I have it. So, like I said, because of Three-Eye Atlas showing up unexpectedly in our solar system, and it's unprecedented on many different aspects of it. Science has never seen whatever it might be, a space rock, comet, whatever, with certain qualities that it has or behaviors. So the question here today isn't, I'm not trying to say or even suggest that Three-Eye Atlas is going to hit the Earth, or that it's anything that I saw or experienced in my dream. But Three-Eye Atlas, nonetheless, even if it is just a space rock that will go on by and do nothing to anything in the solar system, it's still a significant sign within itself that such massive, absolutely monumentally huge uh, space debris of whatever it might be, they're out there, bigger than we ever thought, bigger than we ever encountered. And if Three-Eye Atlas could show up one day unexpectedly, who's to say another one, the same size or maybe even bigger, is lurking out there and is due to also unexpectedly arrive? So, and that ties into my end days dream, which again I've said so many millions of times over the years. But I had this dream. It started when I was a little child, probably about 8, 9, or 10 years old, somewhere in that range. And even when I was that young, I would see some of the most intense sequences of the overall, uh, storyline of the dream, because there's certain events that take place. And I've had the dream hundreds, if not in the low thousands, whatever it works out to, over all these years. So we're talking about decades where I've had this dream, and it's sporadic. It's not like I have it all the time. Might have it once a month, or sometimes a few times a week. That's how I've always put it. And when I have the dream, I'm not always, in the same place experiencing what's going on. I've seen it from many different locations, like different countries or whatever it might be. So I've seen it from many different angles, countless times. That's how I've always termed it over the years. Um, it's not something that I just, I had a dream once. I've had it so many times. And there's only a few key events that take place, and it's very consistent. Even though I don't always live out all, let's say, 4 stages, each time I have the dream, sometimes I have the dream, I might be seeing stage one again, or stage 1 and 2, or stage three, or stage 3 and 4, for example. But even though it's like that, I've seen the overall storyline, right? All the main stages so many times and from so many angles that it's just ingrained. So, the very first thing that happens links over to Three-Eye Atlas, like I spoke about. Not necessarily that object itself, but like I said, it being like a sign or a precursor of what else could come. And if something else like that did come, and even if it itself didn't hit the Earth, it could hit something else or cause something else to come flying towards the Earth. And that could be the thing. The thing in that case could be the fiery star in my dream. So I remember as a little child, like I just said, I saw all these first core stages, which is pretty amazing because I've only seen them a few times out of the hundreds of times I've had the dream. I've only seen the fiery star and it impacting the earth a few times, and that's when I was really young. So because I've experienced the other stages of the dream so many times, they're more mundane to me now because I've experienced them so much. But so to me, in my perspective, the initial stages are the most spectacular for me. Although to an outsider, any stage in itself might be spectacular, and they all are spectacular. Don't get me wrong. But I'll never forget when I was a little kid, and the first time, or one of the first times I had the dream, may have been the very first time I saw the first event, the first stage, right? And it's one of like four. So the first thing that happens is everybody's living their normal life, and then I can never remember after all these years, and I've always said this, how soon we are told or see ourselves this fiery star in the sky. I can never, truly account for how long the duration of time is from when we first see it or get told about it and from when it hits. It could be less than a day, it could be hours, it could be minutes. Um, it could be weeks or it could be but I don't feel like it spans towards a month because in the dream everybody's living a pretty normal life. Now it could be that maybe for a few weeks or whatever science has said there's something potentially coming towards our solar system again, you know what I mean, and everybody's still kind of at ease, but just going by what I go through in the dream and what it's like and everything. um, Everybody's basically living their normal lives. Nothing seems, to my perspective when I'm having it, those stages of aware that something is going to hit the earth or is even coming towards the earth. So and I'm quite sure about that. I think most people, I mean, authorities might know, let's say, but in reality, but in my experience, the public does not seem to be aware that something is going to hit or is even coming towards the earth. There's no air of like fear and suspense in the air. Not to use that word twice. I didn't mean to do that. But what happens is essentially you're living your normal life, and then one day we look up and there's a star in the sky, and it's getting bigger. Now again, like I said, I don't know if it's minutes, hours, days, or weeks. But at whatever point we are told or we see it for ourselves, we'll see the star getting bigger. Now, the closer it gets, it's going to come to a point. I've always said it like this: that once it's basically going over the Earth itself, like it's upon us. We only have seconds, right? It's going so fast, and in the dream, I've experienced this a number of times. When it goes past, it's bewilderingly fast. But it just looks like a star at first, but it gets bigger and it gets bigger, and you can then tell it's like fiery, and that's why I've always called it the fiery star. And there was one time I had the dream, and I'll just mention this in case it may be accurate, it may not be, but in all the times I've had the dream, oh, and let me say this, I should always say this as a disclaimer at the start, but I forgot to this time. This dream, and a lot of my dreams, but this dream in particular, is very, very real. It's completely and utterly lifelike, and it really genuinely feels like I'm going through it in real life when it occurs. There's very little dream weirdness where you realize, oh, I'm in a dream, or things act dreamlike. It's just like I'm really there. It's terrifying. Um, in the vast majority, if not all of the times I've had the dream, that's what it's like. When I'm not having the end days dream and I'm just having normal dreams, then you might get that dream weirdness. Like, you go into a closet and then you're in another place, like a Narnia type effect, which happens in dreams frequently. But in the end days dream, most of the time it's just very, very realistic. So when this far, and forgot to say, all the senses are there. I could smell, taste, touch, everything. You could feel things, feel temperature, feel pain, everything. I can remember things in the dream. Like, so if I have the dream one time and I'm in a certain building and I know a certain room or whatever, or desk or a cabinet in that building somewhere, and I put something in a drawer, I can come back to it in a later dream and go back to it, right? I'll remember in the dream, oh yeah, last time I was here, I went to a certain building. I'll go find the building, and I look for the room that I put the thing in. I'll go into the desk, and sometimes it'll be there, right? That type of effect as well. So the dreams are very, very realistic. Um, so when the fire starts getting bigger, like I said, it comes to a point where you just anybody looking at it would be like, okay, this thing may hit the earth, because it's no longer just a star getting bigger in the sky. It starts to look fiery, and then it's just because it's headed straight for us, it just gets bigger. It's not moving and all this and that there. It's just getting bigger. And again, this may actually be occurring by the time we see it or are told to look for it in the sky. It could be minutes. Like I said, it's hard for me to gauge the time. Um, but it comes to a point where, like I said, it's upon the earth basically. And at that point there, it's quite large in the sky. I can't remember how big. Um, but by the time it's upon earth, you have to really conceptualize how fast these things typically go, right? These space rocks and everything. They're going 50,000 miles an hour or something crazy like that. It's ridiculous. Um, and the earth isn't even 50,000 miles in diameter, right? So we're talking about super, super quick. So by the time it's upon Earth and whatever size it is up in the sky, you don't even have time to think. Like at that point there, it's seconds or maybe just 1 second. It's so quick that by the time it reaches the Earth and it's upon the Earth, it's like you see it there and then phew, that's like how fast it is. So as soon as it gets over the Earth, so to speak, it's just like phew, like a bullet. And then the impact occurs. So the one time I had the dream, like I was getting into before, so this may not be accurate, the compass directions, but there's only one time that I had the dream where I was pretty sure I knew a country I was in and the place I was in. And based on that, I could roughly tell the compass direction. So when the object came over, this was actually the one time, and I think the only time I saw the object as close as I did. It's the closest I've ever seen the object. I was always very, it had such enigma. You know, I found it to be so enigmatic all the times that I'd experienced it. It's so mysterious and powerful and enigmatic, and yet I knew so little about it. It's just a fiery star, it gets bigger, then hits the earth, bam, and then all the chaos happens afterwards. Um, and this one time I was very, very excited because it was the closest vantage point that I ever had when it passed over. Because I was up on top of like this mountain, or this very like a small mountain, right? More than a hill, I would say. Um, so I was up on top of there, and if I'm not mistaken, when it passed over, I believe it was passing over uh, in the direction of, so it was headed eastwards, and I believe southeast easterly over the earth. So that's the general compass direction. Where it hits, I have absolutely no clue, because all the few times in this first stage where I experienced it actually colliding with the earth, there's only a few times I believe I've experienced that. One was when I was the youngest. Um, it always goes over, it disappears over the horizon. So you have absolutely, plus we're talking about seconds here at this point. You don't even have time to think or react. Um, but and unless you're in the place where it hits, I don't think anybody would be able to tell where it actually hits on the earth. Uh, but it definitely hits the earth because, and whether it hits the ocean or not, I have no clue. I can't confirm that. But when it hits the earth, the impact is so powerful that things fall over. You could get knocked off your feet, and the earth almost seems to like resonate for a bit, like like that. There, it's not just like one bam, and that's it. It's like the only way I can put, it's better to gesticulate it with the hands because like this is what it was like reverberating. Like if you struck a bell, but not like it's gonna, ring with this, vibrational tone consistently. I'm not saying that, but just like how a bell would, like if you hit a brick, it's not gonna resonate at all. It's just gonna go like bam. Or if you hit a hammer against, a road, it's just gonna go bam, right? But if you hit something that's hollow, I'm not saying per se that the earth is hollow, but I'm just saying if you hit something that is hollow, it kind of reverberates a bit, right? And you feel that movement and it like reverberates. That's what it was like. Extremely powerful. I remember I was either I myself was knocked off my feet, I definitely stumbled on my feet, other people, falling over, things were falling over. It was unbelievably powerful impact. And the impact occurred like within a second or so after it disappeared over the horizon. So by the time it was flashing over our skies, that was like a second or a few seconds, something like that, probably 1 second. It disappeared over the horizon. And as I've always said, there is a brief moment when it disappears from view where you take a breath of, like a sigh of relief. You're like, oh, because you, for one instant, and it's only like a second long, but for that short moment, you erroneously believe, but for that short moment, you think, oh, it passed by. It didn't hit anything, right? So you kind of feel that moment of relief. And then suddenly the impact occurs. And when the impact occurs very, very quickly, I would say probably within seconds, it's not a drawn out process at all, but virtually right after the impact occurs, everything just goes dark. And while I never saw like dust clouds rising up, I can only figure that if something did hit the earth, I mean, it's a fact. If something big did hit the earth, it would toss up a lot of soil, dirt, smoke, and all this and that there, which will block out the sun. So that is something that could actually occur if a big object hit the earth, right? But in the times I had the dream, I never saw like dust plumes rising up. I'm just giving an accurate testament, a sincere testament. Um, but the earth just went dark. So at that point there, and so stage one is like the fiery star hitting the earth. Stage two is, the darkness, and then this celestial battle that starts. And stage two is quite short. Then it gets into the, you could say, the worst things, which are stage 3 and 4 and whatnot. So the earth goes dark, and I'll never forget the first time, and even the first few times I experienced it. I think I've only experienced the onset of the darkness a few times in my life. But when the darkness strikes the earth, there's no light anywhere. Now, I've always thought afterwards, well, if people had flashlights, the flashlights should still work, right? Or candles and whatnot. Or if there was a fire nearby, something like that, or a fireplace or a barbecue going, there would be light. That might be true. And it just might be that the few times I experienced this stage of my dream, I just wasn't in a place where there was secondary light like that, right? But all the sun's light is blocked out, and it goes so pitch black. And like I said, very quickly, I would like to say seconds. It goes so pitch black that you cannot see anything at all. Like if I go outside at nighttime, most nights I could read a book, right? Even if the moon, well, maybe if the moon's at its smallest, right? But I can easily see at nighttime, right? Um, I would like to think most people can do likewise. So I'm talking about, this is worse than night. This is pitch black. It's like being in a pitch black room with something over your head. That's what it's like. And the only source of light anywhere, at least for me, those times, the only natural source of light um, were the stars. That's absolutely it. And they barely give any light. So I remember the first time I experienced it, that it feels like you're starved for light. And like as a creature, your natural reflexive reaction is, you panic because you need light and there's no light. It go that innate reflex fear is something worse than uh, what is it? Being afraid you might fall over or hit something, like where you don't know how to walk, where to put your feet. Is it safe to walk forward? Are you near the edge of a building or a cliff? You know what I mean? Or is there a giant pit in front of you? And I'm not talking about those fears. I'm talking about the one that supersedes them all is uh, you need light and you're afraid to not have light. It's not about, nighttime or just the darkness itself. It's just like, well, in a sense, it's, we crave light and we always have light. And when that gets taken from you, that's provokes a reaction that's very, very unique and uncanny. So people were freaking out. I was panicking and freaking out as well. Other people were screaming and everything because there's nowhere to look, there's nothing to see, and you're looking up at the stars like little tiny pricks of light up in the sky, trying to like absorb it in, but you can't really use the stars to see much of anything. So it's still pretty much pitch black. It's very terrifying, and the way it comes on, because it's so quick and sudden. Um, Like I said, there's barely any buildup. It's pretty instantaneous. It's just like seconds after the impact, um, or what feels like seconds, maybe a minute or something. I guess maybe, but it's very very quick, pretty much instantaneous. I would say, and that's a very very difficult time. Now, if this ever did occur, my recommendation would be, well, what can I really say? Um, unless if you have no source of light at all, like no secondary light, nothing, you're in pitch black, I would just say, I don't know, it's up to you. Do what you want. I'm not going to steer somebody the wrong way, but I mean, a good tip could be, sit down on the ground, at least where it's stable. Don't go, if you walk around, you could really injure yourself. Like, you might smash your head into something, trip, fall, smack your head, walk into something sharp, you know what I mean? All sorts of different things. Or somebody freaking out and then they hurt you, you know what I mean? All sorts of stuff could happen. Sit tight for a bit. But I mean, even in the dream, the darkness lasts for a while. So, like I said, I don't want to steer somebody in the wrong direction. Just do what you're going to do and use your own wisdom at the time, basically. Depends on where you are. If you're in a building, you got to remember as well, everything just got shaken up. Things could topple over and hit you too, right? So, just use your caution and wisdom. Uh, but in the dream, the darkness does clear up after some time. How long for sure? I can't say for sure. According to the Bible, this could be the period of time of 5 months where the bad stuff is going on. And, you know, very early on in that 5 month period, like when all this stuff is starting hitting the earth and all the other events of the end days, according to the Bible and Revelation, they're all going to happen quite quickly, right? I cover this in my book and everything. Um, but the bad people who failed at judgment, they're going to be the ones, whether the judgment has happened at that time or afterwards, right? Whether it's before, during, or after the judgment, it is said there's going to be a period of 5 months where the wicked won't be able to escape death or even achieve death. And it's going to be 5 months of torment. And presumably, rightfully so, that those who pass in judgment, the righteous, um, being righteous after being decreed so judgment, they're going to be redeemed from the earth, allegedly, according to the Bible. So, I would say hang on tight because at some point it's going to get bright again. I don't think it stays dark forever. I think it clears up after some point, which again would make sense in a realistic light if the sun was obscured because of impact debris, right? It could clear up after a while, right? Um, so, anyways, nonetheless, going on. So the impact has occurred. That's stage one. The darkness. We're in stage two. So the next thing that occurs is very quickly after the darkness strikes. Right. Like I said, it has a rapid onset. Very, very nearly instantaneous. Within seconds or so from when the darkness strikes, and because everybody's looking up at the stars, and I saw this as a little child, like the first time I had the dream, and it really perplexed me at the time. But when I looked up in the sky as a little child at the stars, I was looking at all these stars up in the sky, like, hungry for light and all that there, trying to see my way, and I couldn't, even with the starlight. And it was like all of a sudden, as if somebody had snapped their fingers or blew a whistle, it's like a battle started. But what it looked like was some of the stars, which weren't obviously stars, suddenly started moving. So it's like both sides of the battle, like somebody blew the war trumpet and both sides started the fight at the same time. That's what it was like, because everything was still in normal, like stars up in the sky, and then all of a sudden it's like bam, they're darting around, whizzing around, doing this. Not every single star, obviously, but the ones that weren't actually stars, but were, the chariots parked up there, and they're going to be. Well, what I saw was they're darting around in this and that there. And as a little child, I couldn't figure out what on earth I was looking at, but it resembled, I'm not saying it looked like, but it almost resembled just the way it was happening and occurring, the movements. We're kind of like watching, like, if you had a bird's eye view of like a fish pond or a koi pond, and you had little like silvery fish or whatever, like little brightly colored fish that you would notice, and they're just swimming around or darting around in the water. That's what it looked like the movements and everything up there. So like a dark pond being space, and the stars darting around, the bright stars being the fish, right? That's what I likened it to, and what it was similar to looking. I'm not saying that it actually resembled that or that it looked like that. I'm just using terminology, you know what I mean, to illustrate it. Um, and they were shooting what, obviously must have been lasers or plasma or something, because it looked like beams or pillars of light were like flying out in different directions from the stars at one another, different colored beams as well, all sorts of different colors. Um, Pretty interesting. Almost looks like lightsabers or something, you could say, but they're definitely being shot out. It's not like a fixed beam that's being swung around, but they kind of look like the little lightsaber sticks, like the glowing part, like. So, anyways, this battle starts, but again, even that battle doesn't really provide enough light for you to see anything. So, your primary concern at the time, like mine was, would be the darkness and freaking out because of the darkness. The battle taking place is just something that starts happening right when the darkness hits. Now, that's stage two. So, stage one, like I said, I don't know how long it takes for that thing to get to Earth, but once it's over the Earth, it's seconds, right? So, stage one, depending on your outlook, stage one, you could say, is seconds long. Stage two, like I just described, is probably over the course of less than 1 minute. Or just mere seconds. Now, this is where it gets more long winded, and some could say even more terrifying, just on a different way and level. Now, because I'm sharing the testimony of the dream this time, I'm going to include a bunch of other scenarios and events that have occurred the times that I've had this end days dream. So this will be like a little compilation of all these different ones. So I've testified these things to each your own before, over the last 10 years. But I'm just putting them together here in one place. I don't often do that. Makes me feel like people will judge me as being crazy. But the reason I feel a little bit more confident sharing these more interesting, peculiar aspects of the dream to do with extraterrestrials in it is because, well, one, because I had two prominent dreams regarding end days and extraterrestrials at the end of last year. But not just that, but also because of all the prominent figures talking about the big ET event and arrival in 2026 or 2027. And I've got videos where I talk about the number of and the number of and what the sources are for this theory, or not theory, but this statement that's been made over many decades. I had a video where I talked about Amari Rivera, who's a Puerto Rican gentleman who was allegedly abducted by extraterrestrials back in the late 80s. And they revealed to him that a big space rock is going to hit the Earth in the year 2026 or 7. I think he said 2027. And that alien beings will have to come here to rescue people from the Earth. Um, and that story there is amazing. That makes the tale of the ET arrival event in 26 or 27. That traces it back to the late 80s, right? So we're talking about 35 to 40 years, not quite 40 years yet, but you see the point. Many, many decades. It's not something that just popped up in recent years with people like Ramirez or Corbell or Mr. Bledsoe. Those things are just icing on the cake or sprinkles on top. But the first claim to that number was with Amari Rivera. But like I said, you have all these other figures, prominent figures. Um, Not saying Bledsoe is not a prominent figure, no disrespect to him. He's not at the level of the other figures, per se. I don't even know if I believe everything he says 100% anyways. I haven't listened to much of it, but I know the crux of the things that pertain to what I'm talking about. Um, he could even, anyways, I won't get into it. I'm not going to sit here and judge him and categorize him. But anyways, Mr. Bledsoe says that, an ET being or spirit being, whatever, told him that in the year 2026, around Easter time, I think, some ET event is going to happen. So, I mean, even Mr. Bledsoe, who's not in the military and this and that, that's what I mean by not as prominent as the other figures. Mr. Amari Rivera wasn't in the military, but he had the first experience decades ago. So my point is that all these stars align, and they're all pointing towards one thing. And that one thing is that there's allegedly going to be an ET arrival in 2026 or 2027. As I've said before, if you combine that fact with the biblical prophecies, as I showed in my book and I've talked about for a decade on all my channels and my hundreds of videos, the Bible pinpointed that because it corresponds to the Dome of the Rock. That well, we can rule out 23 and 24 obviously now, but Dome of the Rock was built in 688 and it was completed in either 691 or 692, depending on the source. So, and considering a year flux, because you don't know if you're starting a measure in a January or December of a given calendar year, that means that we have to apply the span of 1335 years from Daniel's prophecy in chapter 12 to from 688 AD to 692 AD, which will correspond to 2023 AD to 2027 AD, applying your flux, like I said, to include 2028. So that's always been the span of time for when it should occur because it pertains to and hinges on the Dome of the Rock being the abomination on the Temple Mount, which, as chapter 12 says, is the what do you call it? The variable that God gave in His scriptural equation for us to calculate and know and be prepared for when the end does come. So the biblical dates, like I was just saying, include that span includes 2026 and 2027, and with the year flux 2028. But 2026 and 2027 align with all these other prominent figures who are mentioning those years. And the Bible says that we're going to see an arrival of the heavenly messengers, the host of the heavens where the stars are. They're going to arrive and they're going to be commissioned by God and Jesus to go out and separate the good from the bad. The judgment process and sealing process will be taking place at this point, obviously, logically. And the ones who have been decreed as good will be taken up and away and off the earth to inherit our citizenship that is in the heavens and to live with our family in the heavens. The Bible verses for all this. Um, the bad angels, the bad messengers, the bad aliens who fell here ages ago were cast down here, as per Revelation 12, include the so-called Satan and his messengers. They're just bad aliens who've been bound here. And the good extraterrestrials, this is reality in the biblical lens. The good aliens are the good messengers, the good angels. They basically police the earth and keep them in check. There's a law of non interference where beings aren't allowed to interfere with the planet. Even in the Bible, angels very infrequently interacted with humankind in any way at all. It was only on rare occasions. But nonetheless, the bad ones do, and they are punished for their interactions with humankind. That's why they are bound to this earth. But nonetheless, all the things, and I've got videos talking about all these things in detail, but the historical events that we saw starting to occur with ET, UFO arrivals and interactions starting really in the 1940s and increasing corresponds to the biblical prophecy timeline and everything, 100%, as I've talked about many times before. So we have real world things taking place that corroborate, the lineup of prominent figures talking about these years. It lines up with the biblical prophecies talking about these years. Historical recent events, the October 7th attacks in 2023, and the course of this conflict that's led up to now. The allied Islamic nations and members who are aligning against Israel all fulfills Ezekiel's prophecy, as I've talked about in many videos countless times before. So we have real world events that are pinning down these current times and years to these biblical prophecies, confirming the biblical prophecies literally, and which also line up with the allegations that there's going to be an ET arrival, a big one, in 26 or 27. So the stars are all triangulate and align together here. And then throw into the mix the appearance of Three Eye Atlas, and not just any old comet, but a really darn big one that's not. It's got some peculiar qualities and behaviors to it. What else could be out there? So that's why I think it's pertinent for me to mention Monday's dream again. If something is going to hit the earth, it's going to occur exactly like happened in my dream. And I've often thought to myself, how on earth would I be able to experience such things in this dream, especially as a little child, or even as an adult? How would I if I've never gone through that in real life? And the only thing I can think, even being a biblical person myself, um, I believe God created things to evolve, and we don't need to get into debates here. But I don't find any conflict with my faith if humans did live on this planet for millions of years. I have no conflict with that whatsoever. If we adapted and evolved a little bit over time, whatever, that's just part of God's plan. no need to debate about this. But my point is it could be an archaic genetic memory that's been developed into us over, let's just say, the millions of years of our ancestors occasionally experiencing space rocks colliding into the Earth and wiping things out. That happening a number of times would embed itself into like a genetic memory, just like how dog breeds have genetic memories bred into them with behaviors becoming genetic memory that's passed on genetically through reproduction. Likewise, it's possible that because many of our ancestors experienced space rocks, and maybe even further ancestors on other planets, I'll throw that one into the mix, but let's not go too far out right now. But it could just be a genetic memory, and maybe in some way these memories can be encoded visually somehow into our genetic memories and then play out maybe at points in our now current lifetimes. That's my most scientific, ironically, approach to this, um, on how I'd be able to experience it all if you were to ignore it just being a prophetic dream being given from God in some way. If you're just trying to look at it from a more neutral or skeptical or scientific approach, it could just be a genetic memory. But it's pretty uncanny to me. Like, I've never experienced an earthquake in my life, but I felt the entire earth shake. I've never experienced a global blackout, but I experienced it. I've never experienced a cosmic battle taking place, but I watched it happen, or a fiery star coming and passing over the earth and colliding. And I always forget, but when the object impacted whatever it was. I forgot to mention this. This is like one of the most spectacular things that I saw too. But when it disappeared over the horizon, you have that moment, that sigh of relief, the moment for a sigh of relief. And then you see there's like a slight second delay, and then you see what looks like this giant sun rising next to the earth. That noise. I think my cat might be doing something. Um, But it looks, to me, the first time it looked like a sun rising next to the earth, or like the sun was rising next to the earth. It alarmed me. Um, but it was just a giant energy bubble. So yes, now I remember when the darkness starts. So the energy bubble, which looks like a glowing orangey yellow sun, starts rising and growing and growing. Again, this is only because from my perspective, it had gone over the horizon. So when this energy bubble occurred, I may have only been seeing the top half of it or so, or the upper hemisphere of it from over the horizon. But it just got bigger and bigger, and it just swells and swells and swells. And the only thing I can compare it to in size and grandeur would be a sun, or the sun rising next to the earth. And it just keeps getting bigger. And it didn't dwarf our earth, obviously, but it was massive, the biggest thing you'll ever see in the sky. And it's just getting bigger and bigger and swelling and swelling and swelling, and it just gets so big it's like mind blowing. Like, how much bigger could it get? And the way I put it is, when it reached like the brink of space, because that's what it seemed like, it then just instantly did the reverse and collapsed down. And once it collapsed down, or as it collapsed down, is when the darkness fell, right? So, anyways, that's just one point that I forgot to mention. That was a pretty spectacular thing to see. It's way too big of an explosion to be a nuclear bomb. Some people have said over the years, when they hear my testimony, oh, maybe it's a nuclear bomb, but this was just way too big, trust me. And plus, we saw the space rock flying by. Um, the other thing I forgot to mention was, when I was standing on that tall hill or mountain, like I said before, and I got my closest look, what did I see? Well, it still just looked like a fiery object or rock flying through the space. But what I wanted to know was, my whole life, is it a spaceship crashing here? Is it a weapon that's being shot here onto the earth to cause damage? Is it just the space rock? Um, you know what I mean? Like, what is it? I've always wanted to know. So when I was on the mountain looking up, and as it passed over, I only had a split second as it passed over, obviously, because it's going so quickly. And obviously, I wasn't super close to the thing. It's still way up high in the sky, but it's the closest vantage point I've had, because I had like an extra few hundred or 1,000 feet or a few thousand feet because of the mountain I was on. So I was just a little bit closer, and it went right overhead this time. But when I looked up, yeah, I could see all the flames like licking and going around it as it flew through the air super quickly. Again, this is just a split second I had to see what I saw. Um, but as the flames and whatever, like maybe even the smoke or vapor was going around it, and whipping and rippling around it, whipping's like the best term. Um, what I saw, I only got a brief. minuscule glance or glimpse, sorry, and it looked like a big rock, but at the same time, it had like quasi geometric patterns on its surface. So I didn't know if it was like a crystalline rock, because crystals can have these type of like geometric patterns. Like it had like lines and corners like on the surface in places. But it didn't look like a spaceship because it looked like a rock, like just like a big meteor, asteroid, whatever, comet, whatever. But it had like these little patterns that I saw briefly on its surface, which then just still left me with an enigmatic question: is it a space rock or is it a technological thing? Is it somehow both? So I still don't know. But that's the glimpse that I saw for a flicker of time, for like a second, split second. Um, that's all I can add to that part of the story. But at some point, as I said before, it's hard to say when this begins. But it's either before the object hits the Earth, and this would depend on how much forward advanced warning we get from the governments. So if we did have weeks from when they found it to when it hits, they might start telling us, with more time to prepare. In which case, the following thing I'm about to talk about could actually be taking place during a period of weeks. Um, but because it's hard for me to discern how much time we have from when we are told or see it ourselves and from when it hits, whether it's minutes, hours, date, like I've said many times before already, um, it's hard for me to really discern when this event happens. But this event, which takes place in between stage one and probably during stage two, probably continues during stage two. It might momentarily stop at the start of stage two, and it may also likely continue into stage three and four and throughout. But when it starts would be interesting to me. But um, at some point before or during or just after when the object hits, the governments of the world will send out a warning. What is my cat doing? Well, one sec. Yeah. So, anyways, this is an important part of the storyline and testimony. So, at some point, the governments will send out an order, whatever you call it, a broadcast, a warning to everybody, whether it's on TV, radio, or what, not sure. This kind of makes me, because of the blackout afterwards, there is daylight during these events. That's why I've often speculated to myself and wondered, is it taking place before the object hits? Um, so we have a few possible scenarios here. One is that the governments, the authorities will find out that this object is going to hit the Earth, and we'll have X amount of days or weeks to prepare. And that during that time period, they send out these warnings that I've experienced, and people get taken to these safe havens underground. But what happens is these warnings go out, these broadcasts, that's the word I wanted, and everybody scrambles. I've gone through this dozens, if not 100 or more, hundreds of times. And it's one thing I went through so much, and I always hated going through it because it's such turmoil that I loathe going through that part of the dream. But everybody's scrambling to find like their travel documents and whatever else they might need, identification, stuff like that. Because you'll try to grab your passport or something because nobody will know what country it came from. You know what I mean? So everybody's scrambling to grab important things. You pretty much have the idea that money's useless, but still, people are trying to grab valuables and whatnot, put their things together that they can bring what little it is, and they have to rush to these facilities. And I believe these facilities are probably military, or they're just other type of facilities. No, they must be military. Um, Outwardly, but because I'm not familiar with what facilities they are, I can't say for sure, but they're probably military because they have entrances to the underground. What do you call them? Uh, sec- Secure cities or whatever. Bunkers. There you go. Bunker cities. So everybody rushes to get, and there's not much transport happening on the roads. Depending where you are, the different times I've had the dream. Sometimes we have vehicles, other times we had to just run or walk it or hitchhike to get places. Sometimes they might send buses or helicopters where to pick people up. Different things will be happening. Depends where you are and such. But you have to make it to these certain military facilities. Once you get there, there's going to be huge lineups, like what seems like thousands and thousands of people, like ants, just everywhere. And there's a lot of like authorities, like police or security or whatnot. And you have to go through these checkpoints, like security points. None of this is like malicious against us. A lot of people have silly conspiracies. I don't believe this is being done to us to harm us in any way. It's amazing how wound out some people can get and what they think. But nonetheless, I'm not here to judge people. But I don't. I've gone through this so many times, and I don't feel or haven't gone through anything negative. They're just trying to help and protect us. They're not working for Satan, in other words. But like I said, some people think stuff like that. So the authorities, what they're trying to do is get people to safety. How much of the human population they can get to these places, I don't know. Probably a lot of countries, or most countries, don't even have them. Maybe if you're from certain countries, you won't have the chance to go to one of these underground bunkers. But nonetheless, thousands of people all lined up. You go through these security checkpoints. I can still vividly remember this because, like I said, these are such lifelike dreams. I can remember some of these events greater than my own life events in my own life. Um, I can still picture this one facility we arrived at, and with all the people lined up, I'm worried about like the handful of things I got to bring. And when I get to the security checkpoint booth, it's like these glass or acrylic walls. It's not a big booth. You go in like one at a time or whatever. They process you. There might be more than one booth, but there's so much going on. Um, all of it's pretty friendly, hospitable, but rushed and high security. I guess once you're approved or whatever, they check you out or document you or record you, whatever it is that they're doing. I don't know. You don't care at the time. You just want to get the hell off the surface. Um, you get put into these like monorail type bullet trains, and at this facility, the trains, I guess the tracks either started there, so it was like the start of the train station, so to speak. It could be that, but nonetheless, there are the monorail, bullet train type things parked there, right at ground level. People will get on them after they're checked at security. They will get on these bullet trains. They whiz down. It's like maybe maglev trains, but nonetheless, they whiz down very, very quickly, have no clue how far down they're going, no clue whatsoever. Then you arrive at these fantastic underground cities, which are very down to earth and earth like. I've been these places hundreds of times. Shops, restaurants, businesses, malls, everything you can think of is down there already operating. Makes me wonder if people actually, if these things are real, if people actually just live there. Like maybe some people are actually born and raised and live in these places. That's what it really seems like. Um, just absolutely dead real. Everything's down there, all the things you could think of. And what one of the underground entrances, once you're down underground and you arrive at the secure entrance for it, you get off the bullet train, and at this one place at least, there was like uh, a spiral, massive spiral, like aluminum looking staircase, like winding its way down a few levels. It would be like if you're inside of a silver egg, just roughly speaking, rough shape, with like a spiral staircase, and it leads. So you go down. So like all the walls are like rounded. It's probably like a safe, capsulated type wall design, I guess maybe. You get sorry, you get down to the bottom of the staircase. I remember looking up this massive, massive door, like a hangar type door. You could drive giant things in or out of, and it opens up, or it was open, and then we go inside. And I can't remember if you have to check in again when you get there, but in either case, you basically free roam afterwards. I guess you get told where you can go or whatever at the initial security check booth. But basically, once you're down there, it's very easy and quick to forget what's going on the surface, because it's just like you could live a normal type of life down there. That's what it feels like. And like I said before, some people appear to actually have been living a life down there. uh, I can still vividly picture this little tiny cafe type restaurant, like something out of the 50s, with like green tile or whatever color the tile was. Who cares? Old school tile. It was so narrow you could only just squeeze through. The walls behind you. The order serving windows like right here. So there's like one or two, not 1 foot, maybe 2 feet of room. Like a big person, I have a problem squeezing through, and that was a little cafe I would get food from. Just one example. They'd have elaborate restaurants too. They even have hotels down there. It's so lifelike and real. It's just mind blowing. So many places I've been to. I remember like certain routes to take in certain buildings and stuff. It's just crazy how detailed it is. But nonetheless, people are being ushered down there. So in retrospect, I wonder, like, are we being taken down there, days or weeks in advance, or maybe just hours in advance of the space of the mystery object hitting the Earth? Um, or do they start that basically when it's right over the Earth? Like, is it before stage one? Is it during stage one? Is it once stage two occurs? I can't say for sure. But like I said, because we're being ushered into these places, and sometimes it's been nighttime when it occurs, but I'm pretty sure there's been times where there's been daylight. So I have a feeling that people are being ushered down into these places beforehand. Now, is it everybody, the general public, or certain selected people, perhaps at first, like a key list of important peoples, which probably would happen in the face of a global disaster where you can't save everybody, unfortunately. That's something a pill everybody's gonna have to swallow and face. Um, but a lot of people get stuck on the surface. Now, stage three is if you're stuck on the surface, or you could also say what I just described, being in the underground safe haven, is part of stage three too, because it continues through that. So if you did go down before the object hit, or if you went down after the object hit, in either case, you're going to be down underground in the safe bunker cities, uh, while all the crazy stuff happens on the surface. Um, so for quite a while, how long, like I said before, I don't know. It remains dark. Um, at some point, light returns, but I can't say how long it takes. Could just be a few days, or it could be a few hours, or a few minutes, or something. I don't think it's minutes. Feels like longer than that. But whether hours, days, or weeks, or months, I don't know. But when the darkness has occurred, that's where some crazy stuff starts happening. Number one of the things I haven't relayed before is uh, the one time I had this dream, and I was on this hillside, and all these other people were up there as well, a couple dozen or 100 people or so. We had fled up to here to get higher ground to be safe and away from whatever chaos was happening at the ground level. So we're up on top of this hill, and it was dark and nighttime. Maybe it's the darkness, or maybe it was just nighttime. But it's probably the darkness. In either case, because we were relatively high up, the city was kind of small down below. And I'm not saying we're at the height of the clouds or anything, but we are quite high up. We could look down upon the city, basically. And we saw these disc shaped UFOs flying in, just a few, I think. And they were still above us because we could see the undersides of them, but they are quite low because of our elevation, low to us. When these few disc UFOs passed over, you could see on the underside they had like these like holes or openings or ports on the bottom, like one in the center, and it was illuminated. And these UFOs weren't all that huge, right? Between 50 and maybe a couple 100 feet at the most, something like that. They weren't massive, kind of aircrafty sized. Uh, or slightly bigger than our planes, but you get the idea. When they flew over the city, wherever the city was, and in the dream, we had escaped the city, right? So it's the city we came from. It's not my country, so I don't know what country it was. But we looked down, and the UFOs parked over the city, and then all of a sudden, from that bright port on the bottom, massive plasma pillar just goes shunk, goes down, vaporizes virtually everything in the city. Like combustion, it just destroys it, like instantaneously, like in the snap of a finger. Bazam, gone. And the lady next to me, I don't know who she was, but I'll never forget this one. I can almost still hear her voice. She screamed and wailed in such a like anguishing, shrieking, like, I don't even know the word for it, like bewilderment. And she collapsed to her knees. She was looking down, like the look on her face, like so confused and scared, and just not knowing what was going on. She was grabbing, she had long hair, she grabbed her hair, and she had this hard look on her face as she was watching it happen. And she screamed, "What are they doing?" But like mortified tone. Like I wouldn't even try to duplicate it. Like people call the cops, think something's happening. Like I mean, like she was witnessing genocide type tone of the voice. Like, what are they doing? Just absolutely like lost for words. And that was pretty terrifying. I've only testified that a few times over the 10 years, but that is something that took place. And over the years, I used to think, aliens. Do aliens really play a big part in these in-day events? But as I completed my biblical studies, now I know the fullness, and yes, of course they are. So now that's why I'm more open to sharing it. Whereas before, I kind of thought, that seems a little bit far out or different, that I would see extraterrestrial type stuff in the dream. But now it makes sense. Another time I had the dream, there was daylight outside. Whether this happens, when this happens along the timeline, I don't know. But it was daylight outside. Maybe the darkness had cleared by that point, or maybe it was just before. And I was on like a school field looking up, and this is when I think there was that air, that sense in the air that everything was in chaos, like it was the end of days. Once something major happens on the earth and it's never going back to the way it was, like that air, that atmosphere. Um, and this building was like kind of empty, so I do think it was probably at that stage. It was probably when the darkness had cleared. But in either case, we're in this like building on a school field, and we're looking up, and all these swoops of light started occurring, like swoop, 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 and they were a fleet of UFOs materializing or teleporting in, but they littered the sky, just like tons of them. And the way they appeared was like a swoop of light, like bright light, like swoop, and then the UFO was there. That occurred, and they were just like popping into existence, like pop, 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 like a whole legion. Um, but then either woke up, I think I woke up at that point, or it went to something else, like another scene or event occurred. Um, Another crazy experience that I had was we were in a city. I don't know what city it was, but it had skyscrapers. And this one is bizarre, but it's technological and would be easily explained by ET arrival on the Earth. And they could be good or bad ones doing this as well, which makes it harder to solve. But we're in the skyscraper hiding out from all the bad things that run around in the darkness, which I haven't got to yet. Um, that's another mortifying experience to go through. I don't wish that on anybody, and that's why it would be better to go into the underground safe havens if you can. I wouldn't recommend staying on the surface based on what I've gone through. Hell no. But then you get the overzealous people saying, "Oh, if you go down into the bunkers, you're working for all the bad people." And it's like, you're siding with the bad people. They don't mean good for you. They don't want to take your soul. And what are you going to do? Stay on the surface, get eaten by something? Like, not me. I'd rather go down there and have a good time, eat at some restaurants or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm sure God could find me anywhere I go. That's what I've always said. Um, but we were in this skyscraper hiding out. Skyscraper was like empty and whatever. This was dark. It was nighttime, and or during the darkness period. It could be at some point during the 5 month period of torment for the forsaken, or it could actually be part of the rapture process. I'm not sure, right? Hard to say, but it was definitely scary. Whether it was good or bad forces doing it, I don't know. But we're up in the skyscraper, had a lot of glass, big windows like skyscrapers do, so we could see out into the city, and I could see what looked like a few other odd skyscrapers amidst what were the normal skyscrapers. And I thought, why are those skyscrapers? Why they look? Why do they look different? What's different about them? So I'm looking at them, and I noticed that they're moving. You don't know how creepy that is. You're looking out at you're up high in a skyscraper yourself, looking out the big glass windows. It's nighttime. You see all the other normal skyscrapers there, which don't move, and then you see what look like skyscrapers, but they look a little bit peculiar, and they're moving slowly, but they're actually moving. That was freaky. Now the worst part is on the top of one of these skyscrapers. They weren't skyscrapers, but I call them that. They are some type of technological machinery. They're massive, and they somewhat resembled skyscrapers, like giant obelisks or monoliths. And I never saw one close up. Now, one of them had, like, on its shoulder, so to speak, like what looked like a little satellite or radar type dish device, and it had like a light on it. Um, Now, what we were seeing through the glass is the skyscrapers, somewhat off in the distance, like moving. So they're like a few rows of skyscrapers away from us, and you could see the tops of these ones like moving, and you could see the little device rotating around, and it would blast like this like plasma beam that was neon pink, very very quick, like energy beam, like zoom, like it wasn't like a fixed, like it stayed on. It was just like a shot of beam, like zap, like that there, and it was zapping things. And then eventually that giant machine, whatever the hell it was, made its way onto our street or avenue, whatever you call it, where we were. And I couldn't make any fine detail of it because it was like blocks away, but it was a giant skyscraper. And that's when I saw the dish thing in detail. And it was just blasting people. There are people running around screaming, hiding. And if you were out in the street or wherever you were, no matter where you were, this thing could see you, spot you, track you, lock onto you, and zap you, and you're gone. Like I witnessed people, the pink neon beam hits them, they're instantly gone. Whether they are teleported away or instantaneously vaporized, I don't know, but it made people disappear. That's why I don't know if it's good doing this or bad doing this. Maybe it's good, and that's how they rescue everybody. I don't know, right? Maybe it's bad, and they're just annihilating everybody. I don't know, but it sure as hell was scary. Um, and I'm sitting there looking at that dish thing. The dish thing, the machinery somehow saw me or us. Like it must have sensors and can detect where all the people are, right? It could even just use thermal for all we know, right? But it like saw us. The dish turned. The pink beam was like facing us, and like before I could even react, like in a split second as the pink beam shot, because it's going like the speed of light. I had like no time to react, like duck and dodge like they do in the movies. The few other people, I don't know who they were with me hiding out up here. We like dipped and dodged. The pink beam went flying through the glass window of the side of the skyscraper, straight through. It might have shattered the glass, I can't remember. It may have even vaporized or off some people that were with us. But it almost struck me. And it was like as soon as I turned and saw it with my eyes, it was like it spitefully shot at me. That's what it felt like. Um, So we were petrified and no longer felt safe, even inside the building. Like there's no hope. What are you gonna do? Go outside, go somewhere else in the building? It's still gonna find you and zap you, right? So it was a terrifying ordeal. Um, it's because we had no other real choice, and because the building was like glass all the way around, there was only like the central part where you were kind of obscured by like this short hallway with its walls. So we went like in the midsection, and that's where they had these giant laundry hampers, like commercial laundry hampers. Maybe it was a hotel. It looked like an office building to me. Um, we had nowhere else to go, so we all jumped in the laundry hamper. And I remember pulling all the clothes over me, see because I didn't know how it was finding us or sensing us. So I just piled all the dirty, smelly clothes over me, and the few other people who could fit into this big thing did as well. And it didn't shoot us, but we eventually had to go outside because it started blasting the heck out of the floor that we were on. So that was pretty terrifying. I remember when I got outside onto the street level, the despair in my mind, like there's nothing I can do. It's just luck of the odds whether I get zapped or not. And seeing people get disappeared right in front of you is quite terrifying. But that was a very bizarre thing. Another I don't have time to mention all the other events and stuff, but during the darkness, various different creatures, so-called monsters, are unleashed. Where they come from exactly, I can't say. Probably from within the earth, like Revelation says. When the fiery star hits the earth in Revelation, it opens up, it blacks out the sun, opens up the pit, and these bad creatures come out and torment people. So I experienced that in my dream too. Different types of creatures. Some are humanoid, aka you could call them monsters. Some of them are very large. You could call them giants. Whatever they are, I won't get too much into that detail. But that's utterly terrifying time to go through. And what else can I mention? Recently, at the end of last year, I had a. I only have time to mention one of the two. But I've got a video testimony up on my channel about it. But of all the times I had the end days dream, and there are times amidst all the times I've had the dream where I know the end days is occurring. I'm in a different country this time. In this one place in particular, it's like a tropical country. I don't know which one it is. Could be Hawaii or Florida, for all I know, something like that, or California. I don't know, or just another country on the earth. But it's got beach and beachside city and stuff. Uh, I noticed that a few times I've had the dream over my life when I'm in that city, people see things arriving in the sky, but I could never, whenever I would look up, something would detract me away from it, or I had to run, or I would wake up. And I never got to see it like my whole life, what was arriving. But at the end of last year, and this is around when, or just before, all those mystery drones started appearing as well, which is another event. Well, when I was growing up, like people forget, when I was growing up, over decades, UFOs were so rare that there were like a handful of black and white crappy pictures of UFOs. People didn't really have anything better. There's very few credible whistleblowers that even opened their mouth back then. And if you talked about UFOs, you were crazy. Now, nowadays, everybody sees UFOs, films them, records them. There's thousands and thousands of videos out there. You know what I mean? Everybody's seeing them. The sightings have increased exponentially in the last few years, especially. Even statistics show that. So there's been a huge uptick in the frequency of their of well the number of them to start with, visible at one time, and the frequency of their interactions or visible observing them. So that's picked up as well, and that just ties into everything I was talking about before as well. If some big cosmic events about to happen, you'd be sure that the good guys and the bad guys are up there getting their chess pieces lined up, ready for it. So, um, but the dream that I had, I think it was September or November last year, around when just before the drones started making the news and everything, making the rounds in the news. I had this dream where I was on the same tropical beach type city area, and watched the video that I have for the full testimony. Saved me time here. But motherships were arriving, massive, massive spaceships. They were not from this planet. Let me tell you that. They looked like they were miles wide. There's absolutely massive. At least one of them, I think or at least two. There was more than one, but I couldn't count how many there were. Um, like parked or slowly descending over the earth, um, filling up pretty large portion of the sky with just one craft, like pretty massive. Very interesting looking shape. Had a red light on the bottom of one of them, like a giant bar light that was probably like a mile long for all I know. A red bar light, strip light. Um, Kind of looked like a dark manta ray in shape, but it had a lot of like mist or vapor around it, so it's hard to tell the true shape. But yeah, the motherships arrived, so that's what people were looking at all the time. So I had the dream before I would wake up or get distracted. Um, so the motherships arrive, and then what occurs? Well, in that dream, as you hear from the testimony, extraterrestrials start appearing. They appeared down on the earth and were apprehending people. So again, I don't know if they were good or bad, what they were doing, but I didn't see them hurting people, but they were apprehending people. I only saw them apprehend one person before one of the beings walked up to me and I ran. But after I ran and hid, I woke up, unfortunately. Usually because I have to use the bathroom. That always ruins it for me. But Yeah, so that also goes right in hand with the 2026, 27 big event, goes in hand with the Bible, all that stuff. I mean, we're going to see these fleets appear, the legions of good and the legions of bad. The legion of bad will be positioned up in the sky, ready for when the legion of good arrives at Jesus. Jesus arrives and the final trumpet blares. That's when the battle begins. The resurrection occurs. The people are judged. The angels go out to separate the good from the wicked. And the rapture occurs and all that. So it's all going to happen very, very quickly. But anyways, that's all I have time for today, folks. I got to get going. Yeah, well, I think it's just me luck of the draw where you are at the well. And if you never leave your place, you know where you're going to be. Like I know I'll probably be where I am. You know what I mean? Probably the same with you, I guess. Um, I would just say take it as it comes. Just go by your wisdom and let God guide you. You just have to take it as it comes. That's all I can say. It's not easy to give advice on that type of scenario. One tip I can say is when people start shouting out, they're coming, you better start paying attention to your surroundings and get the hell out of there, take cover in whatever way you see fit. Because, yeah, that's something I've heard and experienced countless times. Uh, get good at, if necessary, crafting defensive weapons as well, because that's something I often have to do in the dream. We're finding things you can use as defensive weapons early on and keeping them with you, multiple ones in case you lose one or one gets damaged or taken or stolen. Um, but yeah, and I'm not trying to tell people to physically stockpile things or anything. I'm not going down that avenue. I'm saying when these, if some spaceships and creatures arrive in the Earth, running around doing stuff to people, at that point there, that's what I'm talking about. That's when you need to grab something you can use to defend yourself. You know what I mean? Um, but anyways, I got to get going. So take care, folks. God bless. I think it covered most of the major points for this year. Like I said, Three Eye Atlas could just be a precursor of something that could be coming. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like I didn't make Three Eye Atlas come here, but Three Eye Atlas is exactly, goes right in the hand of everything I've been warning about for 10 years. You can't make that type of thing up. And I certainly didn't make it up. It's happening. So it's just going to take something else like Three Eye Atlas coming to the Earth, or maybe Three Eye Atlas will hit something on the way out that will come flying towards the Earth. Who knows, right? But anyways, I got to get going because I'm late. So yeah. So when the time comes, if those things happen, yeah, get ready in that sense. But anyways, take care.